Good afternoon and welcome to episode 13 of Aico TV. I'm Alex Garmston, the marketing manager for Aico, and unfortunately I'm on my own for this episode. Holly is not able to join us, but not to worry, we have an action-packed episode lined up for you, and here's what's coming up. Firstly, we have Luke Loveridge and David Cunningham talking about HomeLINK's latest project in Greenwich. Then we have a throwback to Tony Boyles CIH Ideas Lab. And this is finally followed by the dynamic duo of Steve Bully and David Richmond. Our first segment on Aico TV sees the CEO of HomeLINK, Luke Loveridge, team up with David Cunningham, our regional specification manager, to talk about the HomeLINK project in Greenwich. David joins Adam Taylor-Drake from HomeLINK on the road to visit the Flamsteed project to walk us through the work being done there, while Luke will be joined by Sarah Butler, the EU Sharing Cities project manager for the Royal Borough of Greenwich. They also have some footage on the road. They'll be discussing this and talking about the project in more detail. Let's take a look.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Aico TV. My name is Luke Loveridge, the Chief Executive of HomeLINK. I'm joined here today by Dave Cunningham, the Regional Specification Manager for South London. Hi Dave.
Hi Luke, how are you doing?
Really good, thanks.
Good.
In for an exciting show today. So we're going to be talking about our latest project in the Royal Borough of Greenwich, which Dave covers. They started off very much from a regeneration perspective. They were looking at understanding a baseline of the thermal efficiency of their homes, pre-retrofit and then post-retrofit to understand what the performance has actually made and to understand the impact. But they also then looked at other ways they could use the HomeLINK solution and the SmartLink solution, particularly with the compliance and maintenance aspects, such as the SmartLink gateway and the connected fire alarms. And we also looked at other connected solutions as well for them, particularly around boiler health. So we're going to be going into a number of interviews in this session. The first one is Dave on site in Greenwich, looking at the installation and talking to some of the installers there and giving you an overview of what it is to actually install this solution. And then I'll be interviewing the lead on this project, Sarah Butler, who is one of the sustainability officers at Royal Borough of Greenwich. So Dave, we're going to be going over shortly to you being on site with some of the installers.
Yep.
But before we get onto that, can you just tell me a bit more about your role on the project and what you've been doing and working with Greenwich on?
Okay, well during my time at Aico I've spent quite a lot of time working with Greenwich, mainly on their fire detection and CO specifications. Obviously with you guys involved in this project, you introduced me into the team with Sarah, and this Flamsteed project was very much a complete regeneration of an old estate. And one of the first things I noticed during my first visit is that they had grade F alarms installed by the contractor. And obviously we wanted to showcase the gateway and the HomeLINK sensors and the technology we've got to offer. So I felt that one, for compliance, that they should be moving to grade D alarms anyway, but also to showcase the features available on the technology, that the grade D system was the correct system for that project. Excellent.
And you actually helped them with some of the training as well, didn't you? Could you just talk us through what you did there and some of the outcomes? That's right, yeah.
Greenwich generally put in a grade D1 LD2 system throughout their stock, but as I say, on this particular project we noticed it was grade F and questions were asked, and we then got in touch with the compliance teams and the DLO to make sure that they were aware of that, and they wasn't aware at the time, so we obviously transitioned them back onto the grade D system. And from there, we went in and did the training to all the DLO engineers that are involved in the project, and that was covering everything basically from the British standard to building regulations right through to the technology and how it's installed. So moving forward, it's the DLO that's going to be maintaining these systems, so it's a good idea to make sure their guys are trained.
And we do provide that wraparound support, don't we? Because I think I heard you on the phone today just talking the engineers through.
That's right, yeah.
What one's a question that they had there. So
That's
really
right,
interesting. I thought what's really interesting as well. So we did start off as a regeneration project, and particularly around the energy efficiency, but they are now trying to understand what the impact is on other parts of their asset base. So, for example, the fire alarms and how they can get that management information back as well. Really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we can now cut to Dave on site in Greenwich.
Hello, my name's David Cunningham, Regional Specification Manager for Aico covering London South. Today we're working with the Royal Borough of Greenwich on the Flamsteed estate project. You can see a kind of outline of the estate here. We're rolling out some trials in some of the buildings. So we've got a few flats covered at Lockyer House. We've also got Christie House, where we've also got Aico smoke alarms, gateways and HomeLINK sensors. Baldry House and Dyson House has also formed part of this trial. So as you say, we've been working on this for a while now, but we're going to go and have a look inside. Well, we've just got access into a void property on the Flamsteed estate, and what we're looking for today is just to make sure that the engineers are carrying out the smoke alarm installation and the installation to the environmental sensors. As you can see just to the left of me here, we've got an environmental sensor, CO and temperature built into that. So as part of this trial, this is one of the 10 flats that we're looking to make sure have got working systems in. We've also got just above me here a grade D alarm, so that's one of our 3000 series alarm. The specification here is grade D1 LD2, category LD2. So we're looking at interlinked via RF smoke alarms that will talk to the gateway, and obviously we would also use the gateway for the monitoring of the environmental sensors. I'm now joined by Adam from HomeLINK. Adam's obviously been heavily involved in carrying out some of the works in this project and the organising behind the scenes. Glad to be finally getting there now. It looks like we've come to the end of completion.
Yeah, it's been a long project, this one, but it's really good to see it coming together and getting all the sensors in place, gateways going up, and yeah, looking forward to collecting some data and seeing what results we get.
So yeah, there's I think it's just 2 more properties out of the 10 now to be completed. But obviously once they have been done and we start collecting data, it's not the end of the job. We then need to start looking at tenant engagement.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to benefit the tenants?
Yeah, well, tenant engagement is a really important part of what we're doing here. So we're developing a resident app, which is going to put the data in the tenants' hands, and they'll be able to see, room level insights about their property, the data we're actually collecting, temperature, humidity, air quality, that kind of thing. So the idea is to get the tenants engaged in that process, and so it's not just a passive thing that's happening with their landlord. They're actually involved, and they can see alerts, notifications about mold and damp warnings, that kind of thing. So yeah, putting the tenants at the centre. Okay,
good. We have arranged, hopefully when we can get the mobile units back out on the road within the next 6-7 weeks, we'll have a couple of days. Obviously, Greenwich are going to send a letter out to all the tenants to let them know that we're here to just help them explain why the technology is here and what we're doing with the data. So that's going to be exciting, and hopefully by then, as you've already mentioned, the resident app will be out, so it will give us an opportunity to explain that to the tenant.
I think landlords like Greenwich, they definitely see the value of this sort of initiative and the value of the data. And I think this project's going to grow beyond these 10 properties. There's no doubt of that. So yeah, really looking forward to where it goes in the future.
Okay, well, shall we have a walk around and see where we're at so far?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. We've got heat alarm base on the ceiling ready to for the engineer to slide the head on.
Yeah, and that's the gateway up there.
That's it, yeah. So obviously just waiting for the power then, and then we're all ready to go.
Nice. Read for that.
And then we go into the kitchen. Nice image of that centre there, Mark, when you're ready. You're not filming that. So obviously, again, we put the sinks up. See there. And then again, we put obviously a heat alarm ready to be slid onto that base there. Okay.
Right.
Where else? Front room, bigger room. So again, we've got the HomeLINK sensor mounted. Is it 1.2 litres per floor?
Yeah, so
1.2.
monitoring for CO2, temperature, humidity.
Yeah. And again, what's for ready to be slid onto the base once we've got power on ceiling now.
Really interesting, Dave. Thanks for filming that, actually, and it's really good to see more on site and everything that's going on there. Just out of curiosity, so what approach are Greenwich taking to actually installing these systems into their stock? Is it through voids? Are they or other programs?
On this particular project at Flamsteed, we've got very much a mix. So we've got quite a few void properties on site, but also some tenanted properties as well. And trying to get obviously into those properties to carry out the works has been a bit of a challenge at times, because we've had some, obviously during COVID there was issues with people not letting us in, but also we had electrical problems that needed to be dealt with before we went ahead and put new systems in. So to trying to get round that, we've been working a bit closer with them to engage with their tenants and produce letters to let the tenants know exactly what we're doing and why we're doing that. And obviously some tenants might think they might have Big Brother watching them with new technologies and stuff, so we've tried to kind of make them understand that as best as we can. And obviously with that knowledge, the tenants are then more likely to let you into the property once they're happy that they know what we're doing, basically.
I mean, I found with tenant engagement as well that with all of our other landlord customers, once they understand what the benefits are, i.e., making them more safe in their homes, understanding what the environmental conditions are, the indoor air quality, for example, tenants have just really engaged with that actually and are very accepting of this technology. So we do also have mobile units, don't we? We've done that previously in terms of some tenant engagement. Are we going to get down to Greenwich at some point? And
yes, what we're looking at doing is, because it's quite a large estate, a number of tenants on there, so once the mobile units are back out on the road, that will give us the facility to just any concerns that any of the tenants may have, they can pop in and have a chat with us, and we'll be happy to explain and show them how the alarms operate, why the alarms are there in the first place. And it just gives them a bit of, eases their minds as to know what the technology offers. And
see what the benefits are, exactly.
That's right. And also training ongoing, is still ongoing day to day with the contractors. Obviously as and when they're installing and getting access into properties, they come across issues that we're helping out over the phone, or if need be, we're happy to go back to site to assist with that.
Excellent. So now we're going to cut to an interview with Sarah Butler. I interviewed Sarah Butler a couple of weeks ago. She actually is a program coordinator for a very large EU-funded project around energy and sustainability. So I had a really good chat with her. I actually used to work for the Royal Borough of Greenwich, and I met Sarah in a previous role at Bristol City Council. So it was really good to see how the project that she was managing was evolving, and then how the smart home technologies actually have helped her with that project, and then feed into the wider smart city and housing strategy at Greenwich. Okay. Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. I'm here with Sarah Butler from the Royal Borough of Greenwich. She is the Sharing Cities Programme Manager. Hi Sarah.
Hi Luke, nice to be here.
Brilliant. So today we'll just be talking about some of Royal Borough of Greenwich's smart city approaches and some of the projects that you've been working on. But firstly, can I just, for the benefit of the audience, just understand a bit more about your role and what you're doing at Greenwich?
Yeah, sure. So my title is Sharing Cities Programme Manager. It's a bit of a, for those that don't know, the Sharing Cities project is probably difficult to understand from that title what I do. So Sharing Cities is an EU-funded project that the council's been involved in for the last 5 years, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. But my role in that is to help deliver that programme. It's mainly a programme about how the council uses new technologies to improve services, particularly in energy, housing and transport. But beyond that, and thinking about how the council moves forward with the learning and benefits we've got from that EU programme, my role also includes a wider look at housing and energy, how new technology can support, for example, our repair service or our approach to decarbonisation, and looking at more widely how we decarbonise our own housing stock.
Great. And actually, I used to work for the Royal Borough of Greenwich before I moved back to Bristol. And I actually wrote the bid and managed the sort of sister project to Sharing Cities, the Replicate project in Bristol. So I actually met you in a previous role.
Yes, exactly. So you're a fellow alum of the EU Smart Cities and Greenwich World. So.
Indeed. And I was actually at the launch of the Royal Borough of Greenwich's Smart City Strategy. I thought that was a really great launch up near Mitre Passage, near the O2, where you, I believe, signed a memorandum of understanding also with senior directors from the large Japanese company. So from that strategy, can you just tell me a bit more about it, and particularly around some of the sustainability issues within the Smart City Strategy?
Yeah, sure. So as you said, the Royal Borough of Greenwich launched or produced its Smart City Strategy, I think back in 2015 now. And at the same time, Greenwich Council made a decision to set up DG Cities, which is a wholly owned innovation company. And those two things together really set out our vision and approach for how we considered the council could take forward the opportunity of new technology and start to really put some strategy and a team behind looking at how the council could make the most of new technology, digital and data-led approaches. So really that was our starting point. And since then we've worked on a number of programs that have helped us test out and explore that vision. And really get to the bottom of how the council, residents and services can benefit from the new technologies that are coming into play in cities. A particular area of our work around that has been looking at the future of mobility. I think people might be aware from lots of articles on the news about autonomous vehicles and the trials in Greenwich. But also one of the big parts of our work has been sharing cities, and we'll come on to talk about that. But I think really as well that the driving force behind that Smart City Strategy is to take a more holistic approach, so to not just look at the technology for technology's sake or one discipline, to look across disciplines and areas and think about how technology can be used to tackle particular city challenges that many cities are facing today. And one of those challenges being how we create more sustainable and lower emission cities. And I think for the council that has come to play recently in its declaration of a climate emergency, which it made in June 2019. And we recently published our carbon neutral plan for the Royal Borough of Greenwich. And in a lot of how we take forward that plan will involve capitalising on the benefits that new technology can offer us in terms of a route to decarbonisation, particularly in energy and housing.
There's a huge emphasis now on, with the declaration of climate emergencies from a number of different local authorities on pushing this agenda forward and how technologies can help with that. Really interesting how in Greenwich we actually create a wholly owned arm's length company, DG Cities, to actually help push that agenda forward. In Bristol, it was more of a sort of internal department, but had autonomy to sort of do a similar thing as well. So really interesting, different approaches, but going to the same sort of aim there.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned sharing cities. Could you tell us a bit more about that and how that fits in with Greenwich's approach?
Yeah, sure. So Sharing Cities, as I said, is an EU-funded project that the council was really lucky, and it was a fantastic opportunity for us to become involved in. It's been running for about 5 years, and its aim is to create smart city demonstrators in cities across Europe, so primarily London, Lisbon, and Milan. And in London, Greenwich, or the Royal Borough of Greenwich, is that smart city demonstrator area. And the idea being that all of the cities are trialling new approaches driven by technology, data and digital, to improving systems and services that the city offers, with a particular focus on energy, housing and transport, and a particular focus on how we can move towards lower emission service models and lower emission buildings, homes, transport systems. So that's sort of the wider vision of Sharing Cities, but what's it meant on the ground? Well, in Greenwich in the last few years, it's meant delivering new electric and shared mobility services like an e-bike sharing scheme, electric vehicle car club and electric cargo bikes. In our housing and energy side of the programme, we focused on 2 large social housing estates and sought to retrofit those estates, making them more energy efficient, introducing renewable technologies and introducing smart and connected devices.
Excellent. And obviously from a housing perspective, that's what we're really interested in. And as part of the project we're doing with you, focusing very much on housing and the energy efficiency of homes, but also that wider remit as well. Could you tell us a bit more about the smart home project that you're doing with HomeLINK and Aico, and how that sort of relates and builds into either the smart city strategy or the Sharing Cities project?
Yeah, sure. So the focus in energy housing, as I mentioned, for Sharing Cities was those 2 large social housing estates. And we knew we wanted to incorporate into the retrofit, into the opportunity that we had where we had undertaking works at those estates, some examples of new technology. And what was first sort of drew us into that line or area of the project was the ability for new technologies and connected devices to be able to help us monitor and evaluate the impact of the retrofit measures we were undertaking. So new insulation, new windows, how was the building changing or improving after those measures? So we knew that connected devices offered a solution for us to be able to get some real world data on the impact of those measures, but also through our journey starting to speak to technology providers, and particularly yourselves at HomeLINK, we understood the relevance of the HomeLINK solution and the added value that it brought in not only just connecting, offering a connected device that could help us monitor and evaluate, but also offering a way to tap into other devices and bring together a picture of connected assets. So we're gaining insights from other assets in the home, such as boilers and fire alarm systems, to build a picture of the wider home and the wider estate, and really gave us the opportunity to test out how such IoT and connected devices could offer a solution, not just from the monitoring and evaluation perspective, but a solution that meant that we could have greater insights on the home, our assets, that we could plug into potentially improving our repair service and improving our housing services in general.
So again, I suppose it ties into what you referenced around your smart city strategy, taking a holistic approach, but this time on a much more sort of low level way in terms of an individual home. How can you get a holistic approach to that individual home, not just around energy and mobility, but other areas as well? So sort of a final question for me is, in terms of whether it's the Smart City Strategy Sharing Cities programme and specifically the HomeLINK project that you're doing, what are some of the key issues that you're exploring? You mentioned net zero. but that could have wider applications and significance to Greenwich, your residents, and possibly wider society.
Yeah, so I think for us the issues that the project with HomeLINK particularly is helping us to explore are the idea of how can these new technologies help us, and how do we show the impact and the value, and what does that mean for future housing services, and the future insights that we may get, and also our future response to climate change and ability to decarbonise our own housing stock. So I think it's really allowing us to help test and explore that wider impact. So whether it's monitoring energy efficiency measures, gaining increased insights on our assets and buildings that we own and manage, and potentially routing those insights through to improving our repairs and housing services. I think they're the key issues that we're exploring in the project with HomeLINK, showing that or demonstrating the impacts and the value of these new technologies. I think also it's been a journey together, and it's definitely one of the key issues we've explored is just the practicality of introducing these new technologies. And that's been a real learning curve, and it's been really important to test out, because it's not just a case of going and fitting a piece of kit. We need to make sure we've engaged residents, understand what we're putting in, and understand the practicalities of how we deploy this for this small particular example on one estate, but then how do we scale that up and take the learnings from that onwards. So practicalities of how do we get the data out, what's the best communication solution, how are we going to be able to facilitate access to homes, what's the best time to go in, is it when you're doing works already alongside a boiler upgrade, for example, when you're making changes to someone's home. So yeah, all these practicalities I think shouldn't be ignored, and it has been a particular issue that we've explored through the journey of working with HomeLINK to deliver this pilot.
That's a really good point, actually, and I think what I was quite impressed with Greenwich is your approach to GDPR. So obviously there's consent versus public tasks basis for the data collection, and actually you took your time to actually get it right so that if the project's successful, you're able to scale a lot more easier going forward. So you've tackled those difficult issues up front and how you want to approach that. Which means in future it's going to be a breeze, basically, in terms of rolling out, because what the best ways to deploy are. That in terms of GDPR, what the best approach is. So yeah, I think in terms of just working out those what is best for Greenwich, I think has been a really good project to be on. Okay, thanks, Sarah. That's it from me, and really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today. And yeah, look forward to hearing more from you in future.
Yeah, great, okay. And thanks for having me. And really good to chat through with you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Brilliant. That was a really interesting interview with Sarah there. Obviously, a huge amount of passion there for the project. Yeah. Obviously coming up from a sustainability and energy perspective, which I find really interesting as well, but also understanding that wider remit around whether it's environmental monitoring conditions or the smoke alarms or boilers, for example. Yeah. Dave, are you seeing sort of similar interest or similar themes cropping up from other social landlords in South London?
I am, yes. I mean, I think pretty much all the responsible landlords I speak to throughout South London love the technology. They all want to utilise the technology. I think that they've had some hurdles with regards to who's going to take responsibility for this data, how we're going to manage it internally. But that's something, I mean, it's new technology, it's a learning curve for all of us, so we're all kind of adapting to that. And now with some of the process mapping training we're doing, that's helping them get over those hurdles. But in South London, in my area, I mean, I look after quite a few large organisations such as Clarion, Lewisham Homes and Southwark as well. And they're all, some have already started the trials, some have even started some rollouts on particular archetypes. So for instance, Lewisham Council are looking at putting our SmartLink gateway into their communal areas for their street converted properties. And the reason behind that is because the Grade A, getting access to maintain the Grade A system is very difficult. And when you've got to get access once a week to carry out tests, it's just not feasible at times. So they're looking at trialling out the gateway to see if that overcomes the requirement to get into the properties once a week. So certainly technologies, it's the way it's going. Eventually, I think IoT, the Internet of Things, will be a massive thing. It's just, I think some organisations just need to work out what they're going to do moving forward with regards to processing and handling the data coming in.
It's really exciting. I think we can really contribute to that as well. We've got that support on the ground and
That's
got
right,
that experience as well. So, yeah, really exciting. Thanks
Good,
again,
good.
everyone, for joining us. Hopefully you've got some value out of some of the discussions that we've had, and look forward to seeing you again.
It was great to have a good look at the project in Greenwich that HomeLINK and Aico are participating in. It was great to hear from Sarah Butler, Adam Taylor-Drake talking about the Flamsteed project and the great work that Aico and HomeLINK are doing together to support safer communities and create smarter homes. Next, we're going to take a short break and we're going to show you our Captain Tom 100 challenge clip. I talked about it a few weeks ago about all the different activities we did, 100 of. Hope you enjoy the clip and we'll see you shortly. Next, we have a throwback to the second part of Tony Boyles CIH Ideas Lab. In this section, they talk about resident safety, sprinklers, building regulations, and much more. It is the same cast from previously. Hope you enjoyed this session.
Good. Thanks very much. Simon, I'm going to move back to you now. So, in terms of resident safety, where does that rank on your list of priorities, and have you canvassed much opinion on this?
Well, I think safety underlies, all the other things that are in our housing standards. They're apart from energy efficiency. But if it's about structure, stability, or about electrical safety, or about the quality of water, or whether there's sufficient ventilation or lighting, all those things ultimately are about the health and safety of people living in those. Even energy efficiency, I think, as well. It's although there's that climate change agenda behind it, it's about people being able to keep their homes warm, and there's health benefits for that. So I think health and safety really lie behind a lot of the principles of what we're doing. In this particular instance, one of the things we concerned when we were consulting was that you don't often get a voice for engaging with tenants and homeowners is one of the things that's difficult, because landlords, private, social, house builders, they have public forums. David speaks, for behalf of his members, and he speaks to ministers and so on. There's not the same access for tenants. So we worked with TPAS and TIS, with the two umbrella organisations, and they helped us to set up a range of meetings across Scotland so that we go out and talk to local tenant forums and get a chance to say, look, we're doing this consultation, we're encouraging people to respond, but separately from that, we're going to collect the views from these meetings, and TPAS and TIS will write up a report for us on what people think. And, I think Leonora, but people were anxious. They wanted to see action on, but they wanted that reassurance that would come from the fire alarms. That's what came across quite strongly from the tenants groups we spoke to.
Good, brilliant. Right, Leonora, a wee question for you here. So we said earlier on, you're a private homeowner living in a tower block. So, how do you feel about the introduction of this standard to private homeowners? So obviously, it's not just applicable to the social rented market or private rented, but being a homeowner as well, how do you view that?
Well, I think it's sensible. I mean, especially in a multi-storey, we should all, tenants and residents alike, should all adhere to the same rules at all times with no exceptions. That's my opinion, which is easier said than done. But I do liken owners in multi-stories to still being 95% tenants and 5% owners because of the rules and regulations that go with it. But no, I think it's a good thing for reassurance and safety to have the same.
Definitely, I would completely agree with you on that, Leonora. Right, David, just moving back to yourself now. So, obviously, the Glasgow West Maintenance Forum. So, did your organisation carry out any engagement with residents? And if so, did you have any feedback from that?
I mean, it's probably more one for the likes of James, because as a membership body, we wouldn't sort of go over our members' heads and try and engage directly with tenants. In a way, that's what our members would do. And I imagine that most members did their best to. It's obviously not something they would consult on because it is a requirement. It's a requirement. So it's about informing people what it involves, what the timescales are, and of course those painful issues that James has already referred to about getting access, and that was before COVID. So I think it's about taking tenants along with you and reassuring, rather than consulting when it's obviously a requirement. But James might be able to give a better sense of what some of the queries or worries that came from tenants were before or during COVID.
Yeah, exactly the same question at you, James. Can you give me a wee answer on that, please?
Because of the sort of speed of the implementation of it, there wasn't a great deal of engagement that we could do prior to getting it out there. I do personally feel that the message nationally or from the government could have been told a lot better and a lot more frequently and a lot of different ways to get it out to people, whether it was our tenants, owners, just in general, so that people understood what was involved in this and it wasn't leaving anyone under any misapprehension about what or why it was required. And that would have allowed us to then follow on the back of that, to speak to people when we were implementing a programme, to say, these are the reasons why we have to do it. What we've had to do is overcome tenants' resistance to providing access, because what they see is it's another morning where they have to wait in the property or time they have to take off work to accommodate that, when they don't really understand the reason why. So it's been a challenge, but on the line part of it, people understand it's for their safety. But I just felt that we could probably have had a wee bit more of a regular and consistent message coming out to help us overcome any resistance to that.
Simon, any comeback on that? Any opinions on that?
You certainly get resistance. That's for sure. And it's the most ridiculous stuff sometimes. Some of it's quite sensible. Particularly at the moment, people are anxious about people coming to their houses. With the homeowners, there's an issue about funding, finding a contractor to do the work and so on. But I think there's definitely a need to get that message across that this is a safety measure and it's really needs to be there to protect people. I don't think that's always appreciated. It's seen as an imposition when it's a protection, a necessary protection. There's some lessons there, I think, to be learned. But really, I'd want to get to the position where it's like a seatbelt or the drink driving. People think, well, it's just what I need to do to be safe.
Yep. Simon, just out of interest, obviously we kind of touched on the consultation that took place on this. Did you ever get any feedback during that consultation that wanted to go beyond the standard that has been implemented?
You've got a few things but some of it comes from common areas. People sometimes say, why don't you put it in common areas? But there's good reasons why it doesn't really work. Without getting too technical, the fire service were very, and then the building standards developed the particular package we were putting forward, and there were reasons why we didn't say include bedrooms or common areas and stuff like that. But by and large, no, I think the fact that we had this standard already in place in new houses and we had it in place in the private rented sector, you were looking to extend something that was already there and working, rather than, I think you're coming in from complete scratch. There might be more variety in what people wanted to see.
Yep. Leonora, wee question for you, Leonora. So, do you think, obviously as a private homeowner, again, that any leeway should have been given to private homeowners? Obviously because maybe the cost issue and stuff like that.
Yes, well, that was the predominant feeling I had, the financial aspect of it. Certain ones might need a bit of leeway, they could implement options such as paying by instalments, if at all possible, to help in that regard, because not everybody can fork out X amount of money at all times,
Yeah, just off the back of that, maybe a wee question for you, Simon. Do you think that that's going to be something that's going to be made available to members of the public at all?
I think we'll have to look at it, but ultimately at the moment there's discretionary powers for local authorities. We're reluctant to sort of be too directive in how they use those, but I think there probably is a need for something in terms of help finding contractors, but also help in some cases with the cost. But I also think there's a bigger issue as well. Owners need to be able to look after their house, and there is a cost to that. And some of the things have been said about, I can't afford £200 for a fire alarm. You think, fair enough. But we know that what's coming, to make homes carbon neutral. We know that there are concerns about the condition of houses, and we have landlords who are part owners in blocks who are finding they can't do some fairly basic things because the owners just can't contribute. So there's some bigger issues here about looking after property that we need to be looking at. And I think this is exercise, as I said before, bringing it forward as maybe got some lessons for us. It has thrown up some issues about how we engage with owners, how we get people to accept responsibility, and we target assistance where it's appropriate. But there's a culture shift as well that's needed here. Not in relation to fire alarms, but for this bigger picture about all the things that need to be done to look after houses and make them fit for the future.
Yep, good. David, just one for you, David. I mean, something that you kind of touched on again, just maybe during the introduction there was the introduction to sprinklers into new builds. I mean, have you had any feedback from any of your member organisations just on the sprinklers issue? Obviously, that's coming through for social housing new builds, I believe, this March, next month, with an amendment to the building regulations.
Yes, I mean, it's if it's the building regs, or Simon will put me right here, if it's the building regs, it's all new homes, full stop, I presume. Social or otherwise, or is it only social?
It's only social.
It's social in the first place. The problem, I suppose, at the moment is that there's so little experience of it. I mean, we picked up a few snippets from, if they don't mind me saying, the likes of Fife Council that I think have been sort of doing some of this already, and I think the issues are, it depends a lot on properties, on water pressure, on what Scottish Water can and can't do. So as well as that capital cost, I think there are issues about, you know, the structure of the property may need reinforcing to take tanks. I'm not a techie, as I'm probably giving that away just now, but it is a complex issue, and it will, you know, it's got to obviously be factored into the cost of building a new social home. The subsidy working group, which last met 5 or 6 years ago before the last 5-year programme, or the current one that's just ending, is meeting again next month, and fire suppression is right up there, along with some of the climate change stuff and space standards, in terms of the stuff that will need addressing in that subsidy. I've heard some people say £7,000 average. I've heard some say £3,500, £4,000 average. But it's more the technical barriers, or the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance issues. Dare I say it, Legionella, all these things come into play when you're talking about water. So it sounds to me as if it was very easy to pass the standard, not so easy to implement. And it will need to be part of the subsidy. Otherwise, it ends up being the tenants paying again through their rent.
Any response on that, Simon?
Yeah, I think it started out as a private members bill, and it was originally thinking that it should be all social housing and retrofit and things like that as well, which I think we're quite relieved that hasn't gone as far as that, because, as David says, actually, you know, the cost benefit argument isn't there for retrofit and all social housing. There may be a case by case basis, but that's really for a landlord to assess. To say that all new social housing should have this, that's what these building regulations do. And I think it's the first time that building regulations have actually just made a change for social housing and not for all housing in general, which is unusual. I think you know, the point that was made earlier as well, there's certain momentum to these things as well. I would prefer something like this could have been dealt with through conditions for grant funding. You could have said, we want you to put certain things in, and it's part of the grant for building new houses. But here we are, it's legislation now. And I think that the point David made about with the subsidy, that landlords aren't going to build houses if they can't afford to. That's the bottom line with this, as far as I can see.
The other interesting thing, Tony, if you don't mind me popping in there, was that obviously it's only social housing tenants that set fire to their properties. Obviously anyone in the private sector never does that. So they've made a special case for social housing. There we go.
I'm just curious as to how that's actually going to read in the building regulations, that the wording. I mean, it's obviously going to have to differentiate between social new builds and private new builds. So I'll be interested to see that publication when it comes through. Moving on to yourself, James. So in terms of your organisation, did you feel like that 2-year deadline for this tolerable standard really compromised your cash flow in terms of your organisation?
Yeah, because obviously it wasn't something that we'd factored in that we had to do. So from our point of view, we had to find £500,000. Now, there's only 2 ways, well, there was 3 ways we could do it. The one was the loan funding, which we discounted as not being an option, because we were going to have to factor that in for a number of years for the repayment. We had the option to take it from our existing funds, or we had to reprofile planned programmes that were already there, which would inconvenience tenants who were waiting on kitchens, bathrooms, windows and doors. So we took the decision to have some additional investment into our programme to cover it. But it goes beyond just the 2 year for the implementation. So if we're talking about 10-year replacement of this programme, within our 30-year programme, we've then got to accommodate that 3 times. And that wasn't something that was factored in. So when you're dealing with covenants for your lending and what you've got to actually meet, then adding that volume of money in 3 times in that 30-year plan means that you've got to reprofile a number of things to make sure you don't compromise your covenants with your lenders. So none of that was factored in when it comes to making this decision about implementation. So we deal with 5 and 30-year plans with the regulator. So the more sensible approach would have been on a 5-year cycle. We also had to consider as well that hidden in there was the fact that electrical safety certificates were now becoming mandatory. So there's another cost attached to that. There's also a cost attached to the quality assurance of those certificates externally to make sure that they've been done appropriately. So there was layers attached to it. It wasn't just the upgrade of the fire safety. So if you put it in a context, it could be upwards of about £1.5 million that we had to find across the 30 years. Now, in context for me, that's 200 bathrooms, which is 21% of our homes. It's 300 kitchens potentially for £1.5 million. It's 32% of people. So potentially 1 out of 2 of our tenants could be impacted because we had to find that money. And that's where I try to keep it as simple as that, because it's their homes and it's those people that we're dealing with. And we want to prioritise their safety, but we also want to give them something to aspire to keep their home in good condition.
Yeah. It's all about finding that balance, James, between providing obviously a safe home and a home that the tenant really takes pride in as well. So, next one here for yourself, Simon. So given the timescale that was originally imposed, do you feel that was realistic, given the complex nature of housing in Scotland? So do you feel like that was a realistic and fair timescale?
Well, the original 2-year period.
2-year period.
Yeah, I mean, there was a balance to be drawn. There was a clear view at the time it should be done within 1 year. And when we consulted, the feedback we'd had from the sector before we consulted was that it wasn't going to be a big issue. A lot of them already had fire alarms up to the standard, which clearly turned out to be not the case. So we extended it to 2 years. Then COVID's come along, we've had an extra year or so. It's been 3 years in all. It is a question of balance. It's not an easy me. There are practical difficulties, but I think balancing that with the need to provide that reassurance and safety, I think that was fair enough.
Yeah. Do you think, Simon, given the obviously the pandemic and COVID, that extra year is enough as well? Do you think that should be suitable?
Again, it's a question of there was a view that it should be 2 years, but then the minister's view that another 2 years was just putting this too far into the future. There is a degree of flexibility with the legislation, as it does say that a house should meet the standard within such period as is reasonable in all the circumstances. There is that kind of leeway if you really need it, but I think it's a challenging target. But I think it was the right decision to make between that idea that actually a longer period would allow more planning, and the idea that people do need to have that reassurance that the houses are safe.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold you to this, Simon, but do you think that there could be a chance that might get extended again?
There's always a possibility with these unknowns, but I would think that's unlikely. I think you'd be more looking to look at the flexibility you've got within the system as it is, and that there should be this effort to try and do it. And looking at, if you can't, well, the evidence is you're doing your best.
Yeah, brilliant. So, Leonora, next question I've got here is for you. So do you think that, obviously, as a private homeowner, again, do you feel like a larger scale marketing campaign is required by the Scottish Government just to really educate homeowners and occupants on what the requirements are?
Yes, I do. I think they've been very slow, especially with the private owners. I mean, as evidenced by the nationwide panic caused last November when they got a leaflet drop saying they had to comply, but by the 1st of February 2021. And I mean, they got that extended, but I have highlighted to the National Fire Panel that they need to have like saturation publicity, all means possible, because the private owners I've spoken to haven't heard of it, until I've spoken about it. So, I mean, really, they need to get the message out there, why and why they're doing it, and it's for their safety, etc.
Yeah. So see just for a private homeowner, do you think that it should maybe be policed by insurance companies really to actually make sure it's done in terms of home insurance?
Well, that's a thing that I've already mentioned, that it could, it's a possibility it could impact on the house insurance, you know, especially when they're coming to sell the house if they haven't done these requirements. But I do think that insurance companies should have in their leaflets that they're looking for houses to have this.
Good. David, just moving on to yourself next. Obviously, social housing is heavily regulated anyway. Do you feel that it's fair that the stringent measures have been imposed on maybe the social housing sector, whereas that doesn't apply as much for the private sector?
I mean, obviously, as Simon said, the standard started in the private rented sector. So in that sense, you know, quite rarely, you know, we followed the social sector, followed them. I think what you're probably pointing at is that you can have you can aspire to as many common standards across tenures, but you only really have regulation in one of those sectors. I mean, who truly in the private rented sector, the regulator is the tenant. If a tenant finds that something's not been done that they are well enough informed to know should have been done, what do? Complain to the landlord, raise it with a, you know, try and get legal advice. I mean, most tenants will probably reluctantly turn a blind eye. And of course, we've got a real issue with what you just were talking to Leonora about, which is really regulation in the private owner-occupied sector is tricky. I mean, it's always tricky, and if it's tricky with a couple of £100 worth of alarm stuff, what's it going to be like with energy efficiency standards that are coming, as Simon mentioned, new heating systems in the mid 2020s. You know, dealing with these with homeowners is a whole different ballgame. To be fair, the social sector has always expected to be regulated more strongly, more rigorously. We get public money one way or the other, whether it's through housing benefit, universal credit, whether it's through grant for new build. We expect to be you know, on our toes. It is just a reality that other sectors cannot and will never be regulated in the same way. We're used to that, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose obviously I was touching on the really the compliance of this from the homeowner kind of point of view, and I asked Leonora about insurance companies. I mean, really, there's really nothing in place, as far as I know, apart from possibly a home report to regulate it for homeowners. So, I mean, from that kind of perspective, you're talking about homeowners. Do you feel maybe a bit aggrieved that there is nothing in place in terms of compliance for homeowners, whereas you're subject to more kind of...
Yeah, and of course some of our members in fact the majority of our members will have mixed blocks, of course, mixed tenure blocks, and they're going to have a real interest. You know, if Leonora was saying, if she's a minority owner in a largely tenanted block, the landlord, whether it's a council or a housing association, whoever, is going to be quite interested in whether the owners have done the work, because you know you care about the whole block, and many of our landlords have got mixed blocks. So the notion that there would be, and obviously the landlord who owns that block has no remit to make an owner do anything. As you're saying, Tony, it's probably got to come through either the buying selling process or the insurance process. But even then, I mean, what insurers ask for it and you self-certify that you've done it, they're not going to come and look, are they? I know it would affect a claim if something happened and you hadn't actually done the work, but it's still a bit flimsy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see that the enforcement for mixed blocks, like you said, like Lenora's example where she stays. It's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out, because really it is in the social landlord's interest to have the full block protected. So it's just getting those homeowners to actually do that. So we'll see what comes of that. Just moving on to yourself, James. So, I mean, did you, in terms of these programs or our current programs, did you have to postpone any to do this fire detection upgrade And have you spoke to any other RSLs that have took up the loan fund, and have you got any feedback from what other RSLs have said to you regarding the loan fund?
In terms of postponing anything, then from our point of view, we didn't think that that was the right decision to make for our tenants in general. So the answer to that's no. Quite simply, we wanted to sustain it, because all you're doing is delaying it for another problem for another year, because we have to complete that investment at some point. So if you don't do it this year, you've got to shift it to next year, which moves something else. So it was an easier decision to make. In terms of people who've taken up the loan fund, I think probably the biggest thing that I was made aware of was the delay. So when you're already on a short timescale to implement compliance, the fact that you were left waiting with an undefined date for when that funding was coming through meant that people were probably left in a position where they were going to have to consider front funding a programme in lieu of the funding coming in. So I'm sure there was some open conversations around board tables and RSLs about how they were going to try and accommodate that to make sure they met compliance. But that's commonplace with a lot of funding that comes from central government, whether it be medical adaptation money, which doesn't come through till end of June, beginning of July. You're already on the clock for that year. So you're always up against it. And there's possibly an argument, if we were looking at things like this, that a 2-year programme is easier because it allows that transition for the funding to come through to actually allow you to deliver the programme, so that you're not being pressurised by things that are not about the physical delivery of it.
I hope you enjoyed that second part of Tony Boyles CIH Ideas Lab. We will have a final part for you in the coming weeks. Some great topics discussed there, how Scotland leading the way with standardisation. Next, we're going to take a short break where we're going to see our Gateway adverts. Hope you enjoy.
Introducing the SmartLink Gateway and Cloud Portal service from Aico. A new and innovative product developed with registered social landlords and housing associations, giving you complete control and reassurance when monitoring and maintaining your stock of alarms through SmartLink Cloud Portal. Easy to set up, the Gateway is a roaming 2G GSM-based device, ensuring maximum connectivity possible without the need for local broadband or Wi-Fi services, increasing efficiency while remaining compliant with legislation. Featuring real-time alarm status, fault status, text alert and email notification capability for both fire or CO and fault events, as well as installation reports and replacement and fault reports. The SmartLink Gateway and Cloud Portal service is your total solution for alarm maintenance and asset management. The smarter way to check your tenant safety at any time. SmartLink, a revolution in tenant safety.
The final segment of this week's episode sees the dynamic duo of Steve Bully and David Richmond, our regional specification managers. They're going to be discussing how end users can make the most of their local RSM when it comes to process mapping. Let's take a look at what they had to say.
Hello, welcome to Aico TV. My name's Steve Bully. I'm the Aico Regional Specification Manager for the Southwest of England, and I'm joined today by my colleague Dave Richmond, who's the RSM for Scotland East. Hi Dave.
Hi Steve.
We're here today to talk about the process mapping, which is a process that we've launched around the Gateway to show the benefits to an organisation. It's been very much your baby, Dave, or you've been involved with it. What's the sort of key points before we go through the 3 stages?
The key points really were just sort of try and make examples of how, firstly with the first part, discover and deliver of the benefits around the Gateway and who it impacts within the business. The process mapping is about when we start to see insights and activations coming through to the cloud-based portal, what we do with that data, and then and that's mapping that data out. And then the last part really is concentrating on how we can make short-term and long-term return on investment for the installation of the Gateway.
Fantastic, so it'll be good to go through those 3 stages today. Thanks Dave. So when an organisation begins to roll out the Gateway, there's 3 very important stages they have to go through. The first one being discover and deliver, Dave. So where do you see that sitting?
Okay, so Discover and Deliver was designed for a regional specification manager to have an open and frank conversation around how the gateway will work, where it sits, who it impacts within the particular RSL or customer, and effectively what particular stakeholders within that customer having the gateway impacts. So we were able to, so literally is a journey of discovery, and then from that we will formulate a pilot with the customer, so we can then start to look at and develop the technology specific to their needs.
So it's really getting everyone involved that's going to be involved in it, kind of round a table, really, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Aico traditionally have dealt with an electrical contact within a regional social landlord, and it's now about broadening that conversation out to other stakeholders within their particular business. And so we developed a tool which shows a stakeholder wheel, which we can bring into the conversation, and we can then start to look at other roles within the organisation. Having the gateway in will actually impact them, deliver information to them. So that's part of the journey as well.
Because there's numerous stakeholders that are going to receive a benefit from it. So.
Yeah, as I say, traditionally we've dealt with one, maybe two people within an organisation, but we're sort of now looking at impacting asset management. We're looking at impacting financial. We're looking at innovation, technology. Right away up even to the chief executive, service delivery, call centres, all these different types of people that exist within an RSL.
So that was a look at stage one. The following stage then is process mapping. So this really is again about bringing back in those stakeholders that are going to get the benefit from the data, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, so the process mapping allows us to look at the granular detail of the insights and activations that come in via the gateway through to the cloud portal, but also through mechanisms such as texting through mobile phones, emailing directly to particular individuals or group of people within an organisation. And process mapping allows us to understand what that data is, and then who's going to own it, who's going to pick up the action, who's then going to be responsible for reconciling that action, and then ultimately resolving it. And then being able to potentially feed back to the customer to ensure that the problem's resolved.
It's really important, isn't it? Because all that data is fantastic, but it is managing it, isn't it? It's about who the right person getting the right data to utilise it.
To
maximum,
absolutely.
isn't it?
Potentially, there is upwards of 300 insights, depending on, an insight would be something along the line of a head removal or an activation, smoke alarm activation. In some instances, customers won't want to see smoke alarm activations. There's already a process in place. The status quo would be that the resident would call the fire service, and if there's an activation, they may want that to continue, so not to see that part of it, or they may say, actually, we're now going to take over control and ownership of that piece of it. As much as well as being able to collect data in the background without sending any activations, and then use the pull for trended data to see what the behaviour of the smoke and heat alarms within the resident's property.
That's great, thanks Dave. So now we find ourselves at the final stage, which is the cost saving analysis. So this is the all important ROI, the return on investment for an organisation. So we've looked at the three lenses of the short term, medium term and the long term benefits to an organisation by utilising the gateway. Dave, you've been involved with this?
Yeah, so the idea is to be able to provide a tool for both the RSM and also for the customer to look at return on investment, the initial investment. And we've had some ideas around return on value, so these are the quick wins, and then return on investment is the longer term, using the data from the gateway pilot.
And also worth noting, Dave, is the benefits with the gateway with regards to the other devices that we're bringing to market and what we can then bolt onto that moving forward.
Yeah, so in May, June this year, we'll be bringing to market the environmental sensors, 2 products that will allow us to measure humidity, temperature, condensation, damp and mould within the property. That will then, of course, increase the number of insights, but also make critical the need for the gateway in a property to create the smarter home.
Yeah, just rapidly ramping up that return on investment, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. The more insights that we can provide the landlord, the more information we can provide in terms of the performance of the property, the more value we're adding as an organisation.
So that brings us to the end of today's programme. We've looked in bite-sized chunks at those 3 really important stages, that being discover and deliver, process mapping, and then the cost saving analysis, looking at that really important return on investment. If you want more information on this process, then get hold of your local Aico regional specification manager. They'll be happy to come into your offices and go through this whole process with you. Thanks for tuning in today. Thank you to my colleague Dave Richmond for coming down.
Thanks, Steve.
Keep your eye out for more exciting content coming from Aico TV. Thank you. Goodbye.
It was great to hear from Steve Bully and David Richmond there. A real interesting session on how process mapping can help the end user, how working with our RSMs can be really beneficial. Next, we have everyone's favourite part of the episode, our frequently asked question. This week it is with Indra from our technical team, and it's how to enter and exit house code mode.
To start the house coding process, please put the screwdriver into the house coding slot. Solid blue light come on. Take the screwdriver out. You will see one flash every 5 seconds. Do the same with every unit. If you have 2 units, you will see 2 flashing lights every 5 seconds on both units. To exit the house coding mode, you only need to do the same process on one of the units. Screwdriver in, solid blue light, remove the screwdriver out. To reset the units to the factory mode, insert the screwdriver to the house coding slot and wait for the blue solid light to start flashing. Straight away remove the screwdriver out. You should not see any blue lights flashing anymore.
Great FAQ there by Indra, really interesting and good to know. We have more FAQs listed on our website and YouTube channel. That's all we have time for this week. If you would like to get more involved with Aico TV or have a subject you'd like discussed or you'd like to visit the studio, please email marketing@aico.co.uk. But that's all we've got time for. Please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're close to hitting some certain milestones, and it'd be great to have you follow us on that journey. Please don't forget to follow us on social media, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok and Instagram, and we hope to see you all again soon.